each and every one of you as we come to this week's Parsha, and the Parsha Ekev, where we left off last week here in verse 12. Now, one of the most important things and one of the most misunderstood aspects of the difference between Christianity and Hebraic faith is the misunderstanding that Jews follow the law and Christians follow grace. Law and grace have been put on opposite ends of the ring. And so anyone that talks about Torah, the first thing, oh, you guys are following the law, you're out of grace. You have fallen from grace. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, another aspect is the idea that people have that Hebraic faith is about works and Christianity is about grace. And both have been misunderstood, and many people go to always opposite extremes. One of the most important aspects of Hebraic faith versus modern rabbinic Judaism. I want you to know something. Rabbinic Judaism today, although it has vestiges and its foundation, its roots, the roots of modern rabbinic Judaism are in Torah. But I'm saying the roots. Modern rabbinic Judaism is not Torah. Modern rabbinic Judaism mainly follows what they call the oral law. Now, the oral law is based on an understanding of what they call the Mishnah, which is a set of rulings that were written around 200 of the Common Era. That's about 200 years after Yeshua. Judaism, in its post 70 AD and post 135 destruction of the temple and destruction of Jerusalem, Judaism. Because remember, in studying Torah and the misunderstandings that we have, much of that has to do with understanding history. And we need to understand what history is and how history kind of rolled out in 70 AD. And these are two dates that everyone should have. Let me open this here. These are two dates that everyone should have. 70 AD. Put that in your mind. Lock it up. You know, a lot of people say, well, I don't like history because it's dates and events and times and people and all these things. So a lot of people, but lock this date, 70 AD in the Catholic understanding, or 70 of the Common Era in the regular understanding today. 70 AD is when the temple was destroyed. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. Now, the center of Hebraic life is the temple. Think of that. Adonai, through Moses, gave us the temple. And the temple was the Mishkan, the place of his presence. His kavod was in the tabernacle, and it came into the temple of Solomon, Zerubbabel's temple, Herod's temple. The temple is the place where the center of Mosaic faith is. In 70 AD, that temple was destroyed. Now think of that. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. The central aspect, the center, the life of Israel was destroyed. Now, interestingly enough, Yeshua, when he comes into Jerusalem, he cries over Jerusalem, and he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if you had only known this day and the message of shalom to you today. But alas, it is hidden from your eyes. Therefore, the enemy is going to come. They will raise fortifications all around you and hem you in. They will dash your baby and your people to the rocks. You're not going to leave one stone upon another. All because you refuse to receive the day of your visitation." Remember, that day that Yeshua comes in on a donkey, according to the prophet Zechariah, that's the same day that Daniel the prophet prophesied to the day that the Messiah was going to come into Jerusalem. Daniel says in Daniel 9, in 173,880 days from the rebuilding of the second temple to the coming of Messiah is going to be 170,880 days exact. And Yeshua came in on that day. They should have been waiting for them. A group, a small group, a handful, a remnant was waiting for him. And we know they were waiting for him because they were saying, "Hoshiana, Hoshiana." They were saying, "Messiah, save us now, save us now." Hoshiana, Hosanna means save us now. And they were waiting for him on that day. But the general population was not waiting. And Yeshua comes in and a few days later tells them all these buildings are going to be destroyed. Yeshua prophesied the destruction of the temple. And Yeshua prepared his Jewish disciples. Now listen to this carefully. Yeshua prepared his Jewish disciples to live in a templeless Hebraic faith. A templeless Hebraic faith. In fact, when he said he was going to destroy the temple and build it up in 3 days, which he was talking about, they got mad at him. They were upset with him. But Yeshua prepared his disciples and the true Israel of Elohim, the Messianic Israel, to live without a temple. In fact, he even told us in the Passover how to do Passover without a temple, because remember, the Mosaic Passover demands a temple, that you go and sacrifice your lamb and bring it. Yeshua did not give us lamb for Passover. He gave us a piece of bread, the matzah and the cup, as reminders of the Pesach in the Messianic and the New Covenant era. And so Judaism, after 70 AD, didn't know what to do. In a sense, they short-circuited. What do we do? They went off to Jebna, a little town towards the coast. And then there the Sanhedrin met, and they started formulating a templeless Judaism. A templeless Judaism. And little by little, the traditions of the fathers which Yeshua had come against, which he called the leaven of the Pharisees, their teachings, the traditions of the elders, of the fathers, that Yeshua did not want his disciples to follow, were expanded, and they grew like leaven. And by the year 200, that had become, and Rabbi Judah Hanisi published it in a book called the Mishnah. Of course, after the book of the Mishnah was written, a lot of rabbis said, what is this? What is this? What is this? So they started writing commentaries on the Mishnah. Not commentaries on the word, but commentaries on what Rabbi so-and-so said. And then after all that was written, other rabbis came that by the Middle Ages and even later on with Rashi and Maimonides in the 12 to the 1500s, people, and to even to this day, people are still writing commentaries on the Mishnah and the second great work, an encyclopedia called the Talmud. Modern Judaism follows a temple-less Judaism, a temple-less faith, where they've had not grace, but works to be their relationship with Adonai is based on works. Now remember, we're talking about modern Judaism. And Judaism is a modern faith. Judaism is not biblical. Judaism in its modern form is not, it has biblical roots. Yes, it has roots in Moses. But as we saw last week, that Torah says, do not add and do not take away. Do not swerve to the right and do not swerve to the left. They swerved to the right and they swerved to the left. They added and they took away. And so, when we read Torah today, most people read Torah with the lens of modern Judaism or modern Christianity. Because Christianity, in reacting to a post-temple Judaism and their works-oriented faith, have now developed counter. And what we need to do, all of us need to do, is lay our weapons down. You know, yesterday Adonai showed me in a very profound way that we need to lay our weapons down in so many ways. In so many areas in our lives. In battles here, battles there, in family, we need to lay our weapons down. Because Yahweh is our refuge. And the weapon that he has given us is the sword of the Spirit. And much of our weapons have to do with the flesh, not with the Spirit. And so modern Judaism has developed all this works-oriented stuff. And so part of the problem too is the understanding of what is Torah. What is the Torah? Now we said that 200 years before Yeshua, 200 years before Yeshua, the Hebrew Bible was translated to Greek. And when the Jewish translators, 70 Jewish translators, so they say, translated the Hebrew Torah first of all, and then the rest of the Tanakh. They translated it from Hebrew to Greek. The word they chose to translate the word Torah was the Greek word nomos. Now the Greek word nomos means instruction, teaching, doctrine, or a set of, like the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution or charter of any state or nation. That is their doctrine. That's their teaching. That's their law. But remember, in a general sense. And so they translated that. But by modern times, the term law has been given a negative connotation, a negative understanding. And so what the Torah means, the word Torah, everybody say Torah. Now the word Torah, as we've said before, comes from the word yara. And yara, if you remember, is either throwing a javelin and hitting the mark, or an archery term where you aim at the bullseye and you shoot the arrow. Yara. Torah comes from yara. A Torah teacher is called a moreh. The word moreh is a teacher. If we were talking in Hebrew in olden days, I would be in Hebrew a moreh, a teacher. And a teacher, moreh, comes from yara, which Torah also comes from. Yara is a root word. So the teaching or the teacher, the Torah or the moreh, are the ones that throw out the doctrine, throw out the instruction. And that's what Torah means. It doesn't mean the law. It means the instruction, the doctrine. And this is something that every one of us lives with. This is not foreign to us. We all have these. With the exception of, probably with the exception of newborn babies that don't come with an instruction manual. Have you noticed that? Babies don't come with an instruction manual. You know, your first one, oh man, it's kind of a hit and miss, right? By the third one, well, you kind of know what to do already. But your first one, ay. Your car comes with an instruction manual. Your refrigerator comes with an instruction manual. Everything that you buy comes with this little instruction manual. The problem that I have is I got a lawnmower and it came with instructions, but I knew kind of how to do it without the manual. But what do you do with the extra pieces? Extra bolts, where do they go? There's an instruction manual for everything, and we need to follow it. The car manual says, you know, that's the law. That's the law for your car. If you don't believe in law, you know, then put the oil wherever you want to, put the, you know, which some of our teenage daughters do, or did. Or not put oil when it's supposed to, and they burn the engine. And it sounds familiar to anybody. And so the Torah is the instruction manual for mankind. For who? Mankind. Now, most people think that the Torah is the instruction manual for the Jews. The law is for the Jews. Grace is for the Gentiles, the Christians. And so many people have that misunderstanding. But the Torah is the instruction manual for mankind. This is the way mankind must live. And if mankind doesn't live according to the Torah, then there are consequences to mankind not living according to the instruction manual. Now, the instruction manual, the early parts, the first parts of the instruction manual were given to Adam. Anybody remember the first instruction that Adam had? Be fruitful and multiply. After he brought Adam and Eve together, Adonai says to him, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's the first instruction. That's the first Torah instruction. And the rest of the stories are part of those instructions. Our instructions are not a set of boom, 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 boom. They are told in a family. You know, if you read, any lawyers here? Any lawyers or studied law any here? Okay. The Corpus Juris Secundum, the encyclopedia of the whole corpus, the whole body of jurisprudence. Everything is, according to case. But our Torah, our instruction is built in with the lives of the patriarchs. And we see why this, why that, because in their lives we see how they did good, how they did bad. The first instructions for mankind, marriage, that's the first instruction, be fruitful, multiply. Remember, he blessed them, he married them, then he said be fruitful and multiply. He didn't tell them be fruitful and multiply and then get married. And then the next instruction was the Sabbath. That's why Yeshua said the Sabbath was made for mankind. And then he taught Adam and Eve, he taught them from his example. He taught them about bringing blessings and sacrifices to Adonai. And here's where grace begins. Here's where grace begins. Adonai said, these are my instructions. Do not eat of that tree, for the day you eat of it, you will what? Die. Do not eat. An instruction. This is what we would call a hukim. It doesn't make sense. Why should I eat of everything and I'll live, but if I eat of this one and I'll die? Why? It doesn't make sense. It's a hukim. But what did Adam do? Adam ate. And what happened to Adam? He died. Remember, Adam was living in what we would call a born life situation. But Adam, the day he stopped, the day he rebelled, the day he did what Adonai said not to do, he died. And death, like life, begins from the inside out. From the inside out. Even as Adonai began from the outside in, he built from the Amidah, from the Adamah, he built the man. He breathed into his nostrils the ruach of life, and man became a living soul. Body, soul, spirit. And the day that Adam disobeyed, he rebelled, he died. He died spiritually, first of all. His spirit died. His spirit, which was in communication through the ruach with Yahweh, broke. The connection broke, and there was death, which was separation. And then his soul began the process of dying. All of a sudden, his relationship with Eve before, his relationship with Elohim before, was perfect. But on that day, what have you done, Adam? The woman you gave me, it was her fault. Boom. First marriage discussion. To Eve, what have you done, Eve? The devil made me do it. And all of a sudden we see here dysfunction. Mankind became dysfunctional. Nobody knows about dysfunction here, right? Dysfunction. Sin brought dysfunction. And all of a sudden, the first two that are born, they are passed on with the grace system that Adonai gave to Adam and Eve. Because as soon as Adam and Eve died and Adonai reprimanded them, Adonai performs the first grace system. He institutes the grace system. And what Adonai does is he kills a little lamb. Probably 1 year, in the sense of being a born one. Something very cute, something very lovable, and Adonai kills it. Innocent blood is shed. A life that was alive, a life that was hopping here and there, a life that had nothing to do with sin, a life that had nothing to do with Adam and Eve, except they were the overseers, the caretakers. A life that was innocent was chosen, was sacrificed, blood was shed, and a life died, and Adonai took the skins of the animal and clothed Adam and Eve. And he gave it to them by grace as a kippurim, as a kippur, Yom Kippur, as a kippurim. And he gave it to them by grace. Grace is chesed. Everybody say chesed. What is chesed? Chesed is loving kindness. Kindness, loving kindness, chesed. And in a sense, what Adonai should have done is Adonai should have got his hand and boom, destroyed them completely right there and started all over. But Adonai didn't do that. Adonai withheld his hand. Now, when someone does something to you and you give them something, say you're going to give someone something and they stab you in the back, well, what do? You take away the gift. We usually take away the gift away from someone who does something bad to us, and we actually give them a punch. So we judge, but we take away a gift. Chesed is giving the gift and taking away the judgment. So Adonai took away the judgment, his hand of judgment from Adam and Eve, and gave him the gift of covering. Now their shame is covered by the blood of an innocent lamb. That sacrifice of the lamb is grace. That sacrifice of the lamb is what grace is all about. And that began the grace system of blood sacrifice. Blood sacrifice is a grace system. It is not a work. It is not something you do. It's something that is done to an innocent. You partake in an innocence, and you give them their sin, and the lamb dies with your sin, and you take their innocence. If that's not grace, I don't know what grace is. And Adonai has done that. And that's what Torah is all about. That's what the central aspect of the temple of Hebraic faith is all about. But today people don't understand that. Today people think of the Old Testament, which, by the way, never use can I have you guys do something in your Bibles? If you have a Bible and it says Old Testament, New Testament, just block them off. Try to get those words out of your mind. Try to get the wrong understanding out of your mind. There is no such thing as an Old Testament and New Testament. What the Catholic Church invented as the Old Testament in Hebrew is the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. By the way, in Luke 24, Yeshua calls them the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. He talks about the Torah and the prophets. All three together we call the Tanakh. Torah, Ta, Na, Nevi'im, the prophets, Cha, the Ketuvim. Tanakh is an acronym for the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And what people call the New Testament is actually the writings of the apostles. There is no Old Testament, New Testament. And so, one of the things that we need to do is come to and read Torah with the understanding that the Torah is the doctrine, the instruction. Now, within Torah, there are specific observances, like be fruitful, multiply, like the seventh-day Shabbat. By the way, the seventh-day Shabbat is for all mankind. Every, not just Jew, but every Christian should be following the Sabbath. But you know what? The Sabbath is not just for Jews and Christians. The Sabbath is for every Hindu, every Muslim. The Hindu is the Sabbath is for every atheist. Every person that has ever been born is going to stand one day, and one of the questions is, why didn't you not follow my Sabbath? Now, the people that are going to be in very big danger are Jews that don't follow Sabbath and Christians that have changed the Sabbath from Saturday into Sunday. They're going to be in big trouble at the judgment of Messiah. In fact, most of those people are going to have, if you're a Sunday worshiper, you're building your house with hay, wood, and straw. If you're not following Torah, you're building your house with hay, wood, and straw. Following Torah is building your house with gold, silver, and precious stones, as we're going to see. Okay, so let's start here with verse 12. That was just the introduction. We have 5 minutes to close. Listen to these mishpatim. Shema. Listen. Shema. Listen to this mishpatim. Everybody say mishpatim. Shema mishpatim. Listen to these mishpatim. The mishpatim are decrees, ordinances that make sense. Listen to these ordinances, be true to them, and observe them. Are you an observant believer? You know, Yeshua taught his 12 disciples. The Great Commission is not for every believer. The Great Commission, the original Great Commission was for 11 men. 11 men were in the Great Commission. And Adonai sent 11 men to make disciples of all nations, furthering on the Great Commission, teaching them to observe all the commandments. All the commandments. Teach him to what? Observe. Not teaching them the commandments. See, teaching the commandments is part one. But teaching how to observe. See, teaching that we must take one day out. You know, anybody could teach. You know, everybody has to have a day of rest. But how do you observe that? First, protocols on the Sabbath is first, it has to be the right day. The seventh day, not the first day. Adonai didn't say the first day. He said the seventh day. Yeshua met on the seventh day. Paul met on the seventh day. Not on the first day. On the seventh day. Teaching them to observe. Listen to the ordinances. Be true to them. And observe them. In return. In what? Return. You listen, be true to them, observe them, and in return, Yahweh your Elohim will be true to the covenant and the kindness he promised your fathers solemnly. Now remember, the covenant and the kindness he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm going to give you the covenant, and I'm going to give you kindness. By the way, the word kindness there again is what? Chesed. In other words, Adonai promises not to judge you, but to give you. You don't deserve a gift. You deserve judgment. But what you deserve is taken away from you. What you don't deserve is given to you. That's chesed. That's grace. And think of this. Adonai says, if you observe the covenants, if you observe the mishpatim, in return, he'll have chesed on you. Well, that's not the way we understand it. Today, we understand chesed as you could do almost whatever you want once you're a believer, and he has grace on you. Well, that's not, if you observe the mishpatim, he'll give you chesed, and he will act according to his covenant. Remember, the covenant was for the land, the seed, and the blessing. He'll fulfill his covenant of a land, a seed, and a blessing. If you observe them, and if you observe him, he will give you chesed. Chesed is a gift. Chesed is something that Adonai gives if you follow his ways. Look, it's written opposite of what most people think today. That he promised he will love you and bless you and increase you in numbers. He will bless the fruit of your body and the produce of your soil, your corn, your wine, your oil, and the issue of your cattle, and the young of your flock, and their menudo, in the land he swore to your fathers that he would give you. Can you imagine? These are the blessings that Adonai wants to give us. Where we will eat right and do right, and he will bless us with so much if we what? If we observe his mishpatim. In fact, it goes further. Watch what he says here in verse 14. You will be more blessed than all the peoples. Now remember, he's talking to Israel and to anyone who joins himself with Israel. And if you're baptized in Messiah, then you're joined to Israel. And if you don't observe, and you are a Gentile that has been grafted into Messiah and you don't observe, then you will get the same judgment as a Jewish person who doesn't observe. You will be more blessed than all the peoples. No man or woman among you shall be barren, no male or female of your beasts infertile. Yahweh will keep all sickness far from you. He will not afflict you with the diseases of Egypt, which you have known, which we know now, but will save them for those who hate you. That's a promise. That's a promise that we are not living in today. That's a promise that we are not observing today, that we're not receiving, because even us, we have returned to the Elohim of our fathers. We have returned to the Yahweh of Abraham. We have returned to Adonai. But how many years have we lived like the pagans? How many years have we lived not following Torah? How many years? This is why it is vital that we teach Torah to our young people, our babies, our children, our grandchildren, so that they could grow up healthy, wealthy, wise. So that they could grow up successful. So that they could grow up in prosperity. Adonai is promising prosperity to Israel here if they what? Listen to the ordinances, be true to them, observe them, and in return. In fact, even the nations that outnumber us will be swept away. Adonai will give us the land. Now, early on, going with Joshua into the land, we see where some of our people just started falling away, not following exactly. If we go to chapter 8, all the commandments I enjoin on you today, you must keep and observe, so that you may live and increase in numbers and enter into the land that Yahweh promised on oath to your fathers to make it your own. And here's where we need to really understand. We're not talking salvation here. Remember, we're not talking salvation here. Here's the first thing when I start talking about Torah, when I talk about this to many people, oh, you're talking about salvation by works. No, I'm not. I'm talking to a saved people. Remember what we said. Adonai did not give us the Torah in Goshen and told us, keep the Torah and you will be redeemed. No, he redeemed us by grace through faith by the blood of the Lamb. How were we redeemed? By something that doesn't make sense. You get a lamb, you sacrifice the lamb, an innocent lamb that has done nothing its whole life, 1-year-old, and you get blood and you put it on the lintels and doorposts of the house, and salvation comes through that? That doesn't make sense. It's because Adonai uses this as a model from Genesis with Adam to Moses to the sacrificial system to Yeshua, the Lamb of Elohim, who took away the sin of the world. In fact, Yeshua was the lamb that was sacrificed at the foundation of the world. Think of that. The book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, at the end, tells us that Yeshua was that lamb that was sacrificed at the foundation of the world. And since he lives outside of time, not in time, he is at all time, he could do that. But these commandments give us life. After Goshen, after we were redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, he took us to Sinai, and at Sinai he gave us the Torah and says, this is how a saved man lives. This is how a redeemed man lives. If you don't live this way, then you will die. We're talking about physical life, physical death, physical prosperity, success or no success, prosperity or wantonness. If we follow the commandments, we will be prosperous. Now, I'm not talking that every one of us will live like a king. Well, I'm not doing all that prosperity bit that, every one of you should be driving a Cadillac. If you're a believer, you should be driving a Cadillac. And if you're not driving a Cadillac, you're not in faith. That's a bunch of hogwash. We're not talking hyper prosperity or jewels and, resorts and the high life that even some of these preachers, by the way, what bugs me about these wolves in sheep's clothing preachers is that they're always asking their flock to give so that they could be prosperous. The only ones that are prospering is the preachers. And the flock gets fleeced, and most of the flock lives in poverty for the prosperity of the preacher. That is evil, at least in my book. You will live. It's about living now. It's about having everything we need. Prosperity in life in the scriptures is about having those things we need. We don't need big stuff. We just, our needs being met. In fact, even here in America, most of us live. And we think we're poor. If you think you're poor, you're actually middle class. If you're middle class, you're probably actually rich. Now, you might think if you're middle class, you're poor. But we really haven't seen the rest of the world. We really haven't. He goes on. In verse 3, He humbled you. He made you feel hunger. He fed you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to make you understand. Why did Adonai do these things? To make you understand that man does not live on bread alone, but lives from everything that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Have you ever heard that one before? Why did we go through those 40 years? If we obey Yahweh, His mouth, His word, the word of Elohim, the word of Elohim has been given to us, and we need to live, not just by bread alone. The sustenance, the things, the houses, the car, all that, that's not how we live. Those might be blessings that He gives us, but that's not, we actually live from everything that comes from the mouth of Adonai, which are His promises. His promises that He gives to us. The clothes on your back did not wear out. The feet were not swollen at those 40 years. Learn from this that Yahweh your Elohim was training you as a man trains his child. The 40 years in the wilderness that we got because we disobeyed was a training. That was our boot camp. Think of it. Adonai was training us. He put us in boot camp. Now, when you're going through something in life, it doesn't matter what it is, everything that He allows to us, everything He allows to us, just think of it as a boot camp. You're in boot camp. Oh, I can't take it anymore. I just want to give up. I can't take it. You're in boot camp. I'm pretty sure even Sonny, when he was in Marine Corps boot camp, I bet you it was hard, Sonny. It was hard. Sometimes, oh man, how am I going to get through this? I was a little guy at boot camp. I only weighed 102 when I went to boot camp. Just a small little guy. And all these big guys there. And I had to do all the things that and I was, especially the pull-ups. And it was hard for me to get someone and try to throw them over. They get me and boom, 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 have me all over the mat. It was hard. I wanted to give up. But we're just in training. Training for what? Training for what Adonai has for you. for the ministry and the opportunities he has for you. Before, before David killed Goliath, he trained with lion and bear. And probably before lion and bear with rats or skunks or stuff like that. Some of you are going through your skunk training right now. Some through your lion and bears training. But it's all training that Adonai wants to do. In verse 10 he says, you will eat and have all you want, and you will bless Yahweh your Elohim in the rich land he has given you. You will eat and you will bless Yahweh. By the way, here's where we get, underline that, here's where we get the blessing for the meals. Now, some rabbis, because it says you will bless Yahweh, have said that it's the blessing after meals. Some people do the blessing before the meals. Some people do the blessing after the meals. Some people do both. But this is where we get the idea of blessing before meals. And the blessing is Baruch Atah Yahweh Eloheinu Melech Haloam Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, that you have given us fruit from the land and bread from the earth. And so this is a blessing that has been said since ages ago. Nobody even knows where the origin is. It's so long ago. But here's where the blessing comes from. By the way, as believers, we don't bless the food. We don't bless the food. We bless Adonai for giving us bread from the earth. And blessings could be said standing or sitting. Prayer is either done standing, on our knees, or prostrate before Adonai. We are warned not to become proud of heart. In chapter 9, verse 4, it is I, for my own goodness, that Yahweh has, it is for my own goodness that Yahweh has brought me in possession of this land. One of the things that we must never say is because of me. That's self-righteousness. It's always because of who? Because of him. Chapter 10, he reminds them of the Ark of the Covenant, the 10 sayings that he spoke. Verse 12, and now Israel, what does Elohim ask of you? Only this, to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to follow all his ways, to love him, to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul. Keep the commandments and the mishpatim of Yahweh, for that is your good I lay on you today. Think of it. That's all we have to do. That's it. It's very simple. We do that, and he'll bless us. We don't do that, and we curse ourselves. In verse 15, he then says, it was to your fathers that Yahweh set his heart to love them, and after them of all the nations chose their descendants. You yourselves up to the present day. Circumcise your heart then, and be obstinate no longer. So here he gives us what physical circumcision is also, it is really about what? Circumcision of the heart. And let's see, the last thing I want to share here is chapter 11, verse 18. Let these words of mine remain in your heart and in your soul. Fasten them on your hand as a sign, on your forehead as a circlet. Teach them to your children. Say them over to them, whether in rest in your home, house, walking abroad, lying down at your rising. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that you and your children may live long in the land that Yahweh swore to your fathers he would give them, so long as there is a sky above and an earth beneath. Adonai calls us to write these words. Now, the Jews have taken this literally, and they have little boxes with only certain scriptures, not everything. They can't put them in a little box. But these things should be written in our hand. In other words, we should have them right up. It should be as a circlet between our eyes. In other words, we should have these words memorized. What he teaches us. And this is why we go over and over and over, so that we could learn, memorize them, have them at ready hand, have them right there at a moment's notice. Always be ready to know the word. Today we don't know the word. We could read the word and we hear the word and we have all kinds of gadgets, but thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. This is what Adonai wants us to do. Let us stand. Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have today. And Father, we lay our weapons down. We take up the sword of the Spirit. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty to the pulling down of strongholds, the casting down of imaginations, and of every high thing that exalts itself against the mind of Elohim. And we bless you, Father. Yevarechecha Yahweh Ba'ish. Shalom, shalom. Thank you.